This week explores how LGBTQ plus artists have used visual language to claim space, articulate identity, and resist erasure. From historical marginalization to contemporary visibility, these artworks trace a spectrum of queer expression in the visual arts. Charles Demuth's portrait of Hartley subtly encodes queer identity in an era when overt representation was rare. This coded symbolism set the stage for later artists who would take even bolder steps. Wojnarowicz's work channels raw emotion and political urgency during the height of the AIDS crisis. This image confronts viewers with the social structures that seek to silence queer voices from childhood onward. Through bold text and imagery, he critiques hypocrisy, indifference, and institutional violence. His work became a lightning rod for debates around art, public funding, and queer identity. The pink triangle, originally used by Nazis to identify homosexuals, was reclaimed in this now iconic image by ACT UP. The slogan, "Silence equals death," became a rallying cry for visibility and resistance amid the AIDS epidemic. It exemplifies how graphic design functioned as activist art, spreading powerful messages in public spaces with immediate visual impact. South African artist Zanele Muholi calls themselves a visual activist. Their striking portraits of black LGBTQ plus individuals create space for dignity, beauty, and defiance in a world that often erases or endangers queer lives. Each photo confronts the viewer directly, insisting on both presence and humanity. This is not just art, it's a form of survival and resistance. Gail LaBrosse Volcano's work explores gender beyond binary definitions, using their own intersex body as subject. By challenging medical, legal, and societal expectations, these photos assert that identity can be self-defined and dynamic. The work is intimate, confrontational, and often humorous, questioning the gaze and dismantling assumptions about gender presentation. Catherine Opie's Self-Portrait/Cutting from 1993 is a striking and unsettling photograph that uses her own body as a canvas. In the image, Opie's back bears a fresh cutting of two stick-figure women holding hands beneath a child, framed by a house in a sunny sky. At first glance, the imagery resembles the innocence of children's drawings, but carved into flesh, it becomes raw and painful. Opie was addressing the longing for queer domesticity at a time when same-sex families were excluded from mainstream representation. The piece confronts viewers with the costs of visibility, asking what it means to inscribe private hopes into public skin. By combining vulnerability, violence, and tenderness, Opie challenges conventional portraiture and asserts queer desire as worthy of both art and family life. Nicolaine Thomas reclaims art history through the lens of black, queer femininity. This reinterpretation of Manet's Le Déjeuner couleur not only centers on black women, but also reimagines them as powerful, glamorous, and in control. By using rhinestones and vibrant color, Thomas elevates her subjects, resisting centuries of marginalization in Western art. Her work speaks to both visibility and agency, especially for queer women of color, whose identities are often flattened or erased in mainstream narratives. It's seductive, confident, and radically empowering. Grand Fury was the unofficial propaganda arm of ACT UP, using bold graphic design to subvert public complacency during the AIDS crisis. Their 1989 Kissing Doesn't Kill poster mimics the style of Benetton ads, but replaces commercial bliss with urgent political messaging. It challenges homophobia, racism, and indifference. The interracial queer couples confront viewers on buses and billboards, forcing public attention on a crisis that polite society tried to ignore. It's agitprop with bite, and it made people uncomfortable, which was exactly the point. Harmony Hammond's work in the 1970s bridged feminist and lesbian visibility with the aesthetics of abstraction. Her floor pieces use materials like braided fabric, invoking domestic craft traditions associated with women and queerness. By placing these soft circular forms on the floor like minimalist sculptures, Hammond disrupts both painting and patriarchal expectations. She queers abstraction, showing that identity can be embedded even in formal experimentation. These aren't neutral objects, they're radical expressions of visibility, history, and gendered labor. Before Tumblr, before Instagram, there were zines. Queer youth, especially in the punk and riot girl scenes, used photocopied zines like JDs to express sexual identity, anger, and community. These lo-fi publications were defiant, raw, and intimate. They carved out space for alternative narratives, especially in the face of Reagan-era repression. DIY aesthetics weren't a limitation, they were a badge of authenticity. These zines gave voice to gender non-conforming, anti-establishment artists long before the mainstream cared to listen. Robert Mapplethorpe's photography ignited a firestorm in the 1980s when his NEA-funded exhibition was accused of obscenity. But his carefully composed images, whether of flowers, BDSM scenes, or self-portraits, were always about form, control, and beauty. Mapplethorpe didn't apologize for gay eroticism. In fact, he elevated it to high art. His work challenges us to ask, who gets to decide what's acceptable? And how do institutional gatekeepers react when queerness stares back through the lens? Felix Gonzalez Torres transforms minimalism into an act of intimate mourning. This pile of candy represents the weight of his partner, Ross, who died of AIDS. Visitors are encouraged to take a piece, diminishing the pile, enacting loss. Yet the museum replenishes it, symbolizing love's endurance. It's a poetic, queer gesture, public and private, ephemeral and political. His work doesn't scream, but it lingers, heavy with me. Armed with slogans and literal fire, the Lesbian Avengers emerged in the early 90s to demand queer visibility. Their iconic fire emblem became a metaphor for defiance, especially during protests for lesbian inclusion and anti-gay violence awareness. They were theatrical, unapologetic, and media savvy. This was protest as spectacle, designed to be unignorable. In the face of erasure, the Avengers burned brighter. Zachary Drucker's photographic series Relationship is a trans love story told in reverse. Collaborating with Reese Ernst, Drucker shows their evolving gender expressions and shifting intimacy over time. It's tender, autobiographical, and visually striking. In a world that often fetishizes or pathologizes trans bodies, this series offers dignity, affection, and realism. It asks us to see transition not just as transformation, but as relationship. That's radical. Juliana Huxtable's self-portraits explore gender fluidity, race, and Afrofuturism with mythic flair. She casts herself as a techno goddess, reimagining queer identity as transcendent and otherworldly. These works disrupt binary views of gender, of genre, and of narrative. In an era obsessed with categorization, Huxtable insists on complexity and fantasy. Her work dares us to imagine what queer futures could look like. The Leslie Lohman Museum is more than a gallery, it's a living archive of LGBTQ+ art and history. It provides space for queer artists, curators, and audiences to engage with works that are often excluded elsewhere. From historical prints to contemporary installations, it affirms that queer lives matter and have always mattered. The museum's mission reflects what activist archivist Joan Nestle once said, history is not a luxury, it's a necessity. Visibility has always been a double-edged sword for LGBTQ communities, offering validation and exposure, but also vulnerability. From Wajdanowicz Fury to Gonzalez Torres Sorrow, from zines to museum walls, queer artists have shaped a visual legacy of survival, intimacy, protest, and power. This week's works remind us that representation isn't just about inclusion, it's about rewriting history, reclaiming space, and imagining futures where queerness is not just seen but celebrated.